Welcome everybody. Welcome back. I am Chris Black, and today we're going to talk about getting started and timing. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 3. Hopefully, we've got many more to come. I've got plenty of things on deck for today. I'm going to share a little bit about my life when it comes to starting a business. And tow trucks, it's in my blood. It's something I did for a long time, but I'm going to tell you how that decision I made one day, many moons ago, got us to where we're at today. So we're looking forward to that part of it. And that's all going to kind of tie into where we're at. But today's message is going to be surrounded by getting started and timing. Timing is everything, but you got to get started. So get your bottle of water. Maybe you walk in, get a little exercise, trying to do a little bit better. Maybe you're just chilling at home or driving, whatever it may be. Eyes on the road. Be safe, and let's buckle up. We're going to go for a quick little journey through my past, and we'll see you on the other side. So today we're going to talk about getting started, and that's with anything you want to do, whether it's personal, professional, it doesn't really matter. It's all about getting started. You have to start somewhere regardless of what it is. I'll give you a couple of examples in my personal life about, times I failed to get started. So years ago, I decided I wanted to do this podcast thing, funny enough. And I always had an excuse. Last year, when the company I work with moved into a new building, we had plenty of space to do whatever we wanted. And we were going to set up a studio to do YouTube videos. But I had this vision of doing podcasts. And I wanted to do podcasts because I felt like it was something should be easy to do. I can talk. I didn't really know what I want to talk about, but now I kind of understand a little bit better about what my goals are for the podcast side of it. So for months, I was like, well, I got to buy equipment and I got to get software and I got to do this and I got to do that. And God, no, it really, and I was talking to a friend of mine the other day and the podcast thing came up yet again, which it always does. And, we always talk about doing a podcast, and this particular friend and I actually discussed the prospect of doing a radio show, a morning radio show at one point. We had an opportunity to put something together and just didn't come together, but, never really got started. So the point I'm making is there was always an excuse, there's always a reason. When I had a heart attack in September and I had to start doing a little bit better, the excuses were gone for me when it came to exercising. It's like, well, I really need to, but no, it was, all right, this is what I need to do. I thought I was fairly active and healthy, but I really wasn't. And so changing my eating habits were fine, but it didn't matter if I didn't exercise, if I didn't get up and move around. So I always had the excuse, in my mind for one reason or another. Well, I can't do this and I can't do that, and stupid stuff like, well, I don't have anything to go walking in. Yeah, you do. We all have stuff we can walk in. Look at what you're wearing right now, and you can walk around the block. Depending on what you're wearing, you might get some funny looks. It just depends. But I mean, you can get up right now while you're listening to this podcast and go walk around the block, walk up and down the stairs. You can walk to the end of the street. Something. I mean, there's no excuse not to. I mean, that's really, the barriers and the goals are those barriers are always going to be there no matter what. Your goals are always going to seem like, maybe I can get there. And some goals seem more attainable than others, but it's because, I can see myself doing this or I can see myself doing that. And that, I think, is where we all kind of have to, manage our expectations. See, I've gone off on a tangent here talking about getting started, but it really is true. Once you get started with the primary, goal to get there, what does it take to get to that goal? So, my heart attack is something I talk a lot about because it really did impact my life in a significant way. So a lot of these new things that I've kind of gotten into are now habits. They're no longer new. So the exercising thing was, all right, 5 days a week, I'm going to commit to doing some form of physical activity. And, you never once heard me say, well, I need to get a gym membership. Well, a gym membership is the fastest way to ensure that you're going to pay somebody else to do nothing. It happens more often than statistically, gym memberships are one of the most unused things that people spend money on. It's amazing. So, I try to cut those excuses out of the way. I can think of 1,000 reasons. Again, the podcast thing. I got to buy a new microphone. I got to, buy this. I got to get that. I don't have time. All right, let's talk about the time thing because this is one that really gets on my nerves. So you've been listening to me for the last 4 minutes, give or take. And we've talked about getting started and all these other fun things, but you've spent 4 minutes gearing up for the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about. And that's awesome. My point is, we make time for what we deem as important. So I used to like to watch television or do some web design stuff. And, I would sit in front of the TV or, I'd snack in front of the TV. Like I could do anything with the TV going. People who used to come by my office could tell you that, they'd sit there and the TV would be on. Maybe I was watching, maybe not, but the TV was always kind of a constant. And so when I needed to find 30 minutes out of my day to exercise, the first thing I did was say, where's the easiest place to find the 30 minutes? Well, in order to get the most out of, walking and exercising, jogging, etc., I was, funny enough, a type 2 diabetic. So the window is about 60 to 70 minutes once you eat, your body really can take advantage of all of that, exercising and moving around and, walking, jogging, whatever, offers. Your body gets the most out of it at about an hour after it's, began metabolizing your food and so forth. So you want to be moving when that happens. You want to kind of get that heart rate up, get things flowing. So I made it a habit every night after I would eat my meal. I would go out and walk. And it may just be to the stop sign, or it was short distances at first. And now I'm like, that stop sign is a very, very, very small marker on my larger journey now. I pass that stop sign every day and I just smile because I'm like, man, that used to be the goal. But the goal's so much bigger now. But the point is, I had to figure it out. The timing was everything. The biggest excuse when I talk to people who are trying to get something going is, well, I don't have time. Well, you do. You just got to figure it out. See, we're blessed with 24 hours in a day. 24 hours a day. We get 7 days a week. As long as God has us on this earth, we have been given and blessed to have the time to do what we want to do and what we need to do. But what we prioritize in our lives is not always the best thing to prioritize. So let me give you an example. Years ago, I worked for a local towing company. They were from California, and they'd come to the area, and they had kind of taken over the contract for a large motor club. The company had us working 12-hour shifts 6 days a week, which is a lot, by the way. And so the last thing I ever wanted to do on my day off, which was usually Sunday, was do anything work-related, car-related, anything like that. Because, again, I was working 7 to 7, and half the time I didn't get off at 7 o'clock. At night, I was usually, coming back from Birmingham or running a call or whatever. I didn't get home till after 8, 9 o'clock most nights. So that took a lot away from my family. And so I didn't want to do anything on that Sunday. I just wanted to sleep and be stupid, just do nothing, just turn my brain off because I'd had such a busy 6-day week. Now, what did I get paid for my 12-hour day, 6 days a week, you might ask? Well, I'll tell you. At the time, I thought making $400 a week was awesome until they took taxes out. So I made like next to nothing. And I had a new baby at home. I had a wife. I had, Skylar, of course, was, in kindergarten. And I loved what I did. I just couldn't support my family with it. I mean, I made no money. And, it was just kind of like the first two paychecks went straight to paying my rent, not even utilities or anything. So I said, gosh, this is, I got to figure this out. So I was there for about 4.5 months. And my grandmother, God love her, she and I talked. And I'll never forget, I quit because I couldn't do it anymore. It didn't make any sense. It financially didn't make sense. I was physically worn out. I just couldn't do it. So what I did was I kind of had a game plan, but when I cleared out my truck that night, I said, God, I can do this. I've just got to figure it out. So I left on a Saturday night. That week, I stayed up for days, it seemed like, trying to plot and figure out and whatnot. So literally a week's the day my grandmother said, what's this idea you got? Because I know you've been working on this. And so I told her, well, I got you know, this concept to where I can do everything I used to do with the towing company except towing. She said, Chris, isn't that the whole point? Well, yes and no. We have this thing called soft services, which is basically lockout, jumpstart, tire change, and fuel delivery. Which, by the way, I just learned how to do lockouts at that particular company. I'd never done it before, but it was freaking easy and it's top dollar stuff, man. So I told her, I said, I don't need much. I already have all the tools because I bought my own tools. Yeah, on 300 something dollars a week, somehow I figured out how to buy my own tools to get the job done because they were not provided. And we were able to kind of piece together everything. But what I did not have was a service truck or a service vehicle specifically for that. And my grandmother said, man, that's important. You got to find you something you can run in. And she's like, I'm going to give you a budget and I'm going to help you out because I feel like you can do this. Well, the money obstacle was gone. I just had to find a vehicle. The timing obstacle was never there. Timing was of the essence, and I had to get started. By the way, the beauty part about roadside assistance, if you know the right people, which I did at the time, you can start doing motor club calls, and you have basically instant business, and then you can build your clientele that way. So after I did all this, that we spoke, I guess the last time was about 8 o'clock on a Saturday evening. I stayed up all night long, finalizing my business plan, my proposals, what type of vehicle that I need. I researched, vehicles that were for sale and, just all night long. And Hope gets up at 6 o'clock Sunday morning. She's like, have you been up all night? I was like, hell yeah, I've been up all night. I'm going to change our lives forever, babe. This is the big time. And she thought I was nuts, which, she's learned over the years. I'm not too crazy, but kind of sometimes, I guess. I don't know. So, in the process of changing lives, our lives, I found a 97 Chevy Blazer. This guy in Birmingham bought it. It was this emerald green color, which matched her Cadillac, and that was just a bonus, and it was an awesome deal, and yada, yada, yada. So I called her so excited that morning, and I said, I've got a game plan. I found my vehicle, and, I guess we'll go see it later this week and see if it's still available. And she was like, no, get him on the phone. Send him a message, whatever you got to do, but let's get this on the road. If we're going to do this, let's get it done today. I said, but grandmother, she's like, no, let's get it done. Like, we're not going to sit around and waste time. So I said, yes, ma'am. So I went and, got all my togethers and, got everything with the seller put together. And she met me in Prattville and we drove up in her Cadillac. About halfway there, we had Clanton. And I mean, the bottom fell out. I've never driven this car and had to use the windshield wipers. Don't ask me why that's ever, never come up, but it didn't. So we're driving. Next thing you know, we're in a monsoon. And I'm like, what in the hell? So we get there. The rain is actually let up. It's pretty cool. We did a test drive, checked it out. It was all good. Get it back home and needed a water pump and thermostat is overheating. Which, GMs, that's kind of par for the course. So anyway, the next morning, Monday morning, I met her at her house at 8 a.m. on the dot. And we got to work, putting together paperwork and doing all these things. So she wanted it to be, set up in such a way with an LLC. So I figured out how to do that. I can actually do LLCs in the state of Alabama, believe it or not. I've incorporated many a company for myself and for others, and they've all held up with no problem. The paperwork for the county and city and state and all that fun stuff, we had to get all that and get it knocked out. There are services that do all this, by the way. I don't take advantage of those services because I've figured out how to do it. And those things cost money, which I did not have. So Emergency Roadside LLC was born that day, literally that day. And within a week, we were running calls. So that's how that particular company got up and running. But, the obstacles I had were, some people would have never made it as far as I did. And I was fortunate enough to have had my grandmother to step up and offer some cash my direction. However, between me and the fence posts, I had a Crown Victoria that I could have very easily used for this particular business and not had to worry about it. And then I also had, still had all my tools and stuff. So, could I have made it work with what I had at the time? I absolutely believe I could have, but I was blessed to be able to put, my best foot forward and get things rolling. So that kind of gives you an idea of the thought process of one of my businesses that I got into. Now, as that business rolled on, we did so well, we ended up buying a rollback. And the rollback was a 2005 Ford F-650. I bought it from the big dog in town, Mr. Billy Rabin. He was the owner of B&R Record Service. He was in the record industry at the time, man. He was a big deal. And it was a big deal until he retired. And he's still a big deal to me. He's a great guy. But that's where I got my start. And Mr. Billy Rabin and I made a deal on that first truck. And I told him I'd pay him cash. And I said, I'll see you in an hour. I don't think he believed me. That was another one of my grandmother deals. And so we got into the towing business. And, the towing business went great. And when that, was going well, it went really well. At one point, we had a 24-hour repair shop. We were the only 24-hour repair shop in a 100-mile radius that I knew of, if not further. We had the AAA contract. We also had, several mechanics we ran with. At one point, we had 3 tow trucks and a service truck and ran more calls than most people who had double the equipment. And we made technology work for us, man. We used GPS tracking. We used our Nextels. We kept everybody on the same page. It just made it work. And it was fun. Like, working for me was fun. At least I thought it was. And my guys did all right. We weren't setting the woods on fire and making millionaires, but, they were making money. And, when it was good, it was good. When it was bad, it was bad. But as a team, we all worked together. And I respected those guys. A lot of them, I still stay in contact with. Some of them, they dropped off the face of the earth, and good for them. But, those are the good old days, in my opinion. The towing industry was really popping back then. And, I kind of regretted getting out of it. So when we come back, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the timing of things and how timing really does make all the difference in the world.
All right, so we're back and kind of go into this a little bit more on the timing aspect of it and getting started. So after being in business for 3.5 years, I enjoyed it. I had fun. I loved every minute of it. But it was exhausting. And the money wasn't as readily available and flowing as it once was. And it had nothing to do with, what we were doing, that we were doing anything wrong. It's just, it is what it is. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. And we had a slow patch, and we had people, jump ship. And we had a few people that, took things that didn't belong to them, and money and things of that nature. And, I take responsibility for it. It could have been better, but, after struggling for a while and kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I decided that instead of, riding a sinking ship, I was going to sell out while I could and do something different. So I reached out to an old, counterpart friend of mine, and he had a position available near where my mother worked. So I closed down the shop, sold off what I could, and we packed up and moved an hour away to be closer to my mother. I always wanted my mother to have a relationship with her grandkids. That was always very important to me. I was very close to my grandmother, both my grandparents really, but I was really close to my grandmother in Montgomery. And, I didn't get to see them as much as I wanted to growing up. I saw them during the summers and around holidays and stuff like that. But I wanted my kids to have that, and I had an opportunity to do that. So we did. And we packed up and, moved to the beautiful little 3-bedroom, 1-bath bungalow, about 1,200 square feet. It was about half the size of the house we lived in before. And, we downsized quite a bit. And it was not easy, but it was a new adventure. I was so excited. And the store manager job I thought I was getting, I didn't get. And to be fair, I was never, really offered a store manager job, but it was kind of, whatever. But I wound up taking a sales associate job and eventually got promoted. And, that was fun. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't making a whole lot of money. And in January of that year, I found out that my wife was pregnant. So we moved in October, just got through the holidays, and find out we've got one on the way. That's really cool. So I was really excited. I got to figure out what I want to be when I grow up, and I got to do better, and all this crazy stuff. And so I kind of took the store manager job and the process of that, and I was like, that's really cool, And my wife started having some difficulty, and long story short, we found out that, we lost twins through a miscarriage. So that was devastating. grateful for the kids that we have. You know, I always wonder, I guess that was, wow, it was 10 years ago this year. Always, like I said, grateful for what we have. And, you always kind of wonder, I guess. But it really kind of put things in perspective for me a little bit. So after a few more months there, things were just really not progressing as well as I thought they should with my current position. And so I had an opportunity to make a move, and I went and worked a big old national retail chain. Well, it wasn't really national, it was regional, but it was in Columbus, which was about an hour away. So I drove to Columbus and did my interview. I was hired on the spot, you know, and that was it. Became an MIT and started my career, with H. Gregg. So I started, this is such a weird story, but I literally started the week before Black Friday. And then, of course, the week of Black Friday was absolutely nothing I'd ever seen before. My mom wasn't feeling good that week after Thanksgiving, and I get a call from my wife, and she's like, your mother's not feeling well. She's going to go to the ER, and we're going to see what's up. So she went to the ER, and they admitted her. So when I got off work that night at 9 o'clock, I went by the hospital to see her, and we chatted, and I talked to her doctor and all that other fun stuff, and they were doing something exploratory first thing the next morning. Found out the next day that she had quite a few things going on, and they did, an emergency procedure and basically saved her life. That was shocking. And again, we've just made this move, gosh, we'd only been there a little over a year, and here we are. Like I'm able to take care of her household and stuff while she's recovering, and she's now in Georgia recovering, and we're able to keep an eye on the pets and all that fun stuff. And she comes home, she's gonna need lots of help. And Hope was a stay-at-home mom at the time, so that really kind of worked for everybody. And so we were able to help her recover and all that fun stuff. And I was at H. Gregg for a little while, and then about a year later, and it's funny, I was at the first job I moved to for a year, and I was at H. Gregg for a year. My start date and end date were exactly the same, and then I went to work for a national retail bank. They call it regional banking, but anyway. So through the process, I got an opportunity to go back to H. Gregg after being in retail banking for a year and a half, and I took the opportunity. I learned a lot about banking. That's a whole podcast on its own, and I have some friends that I worked with in banking who are also no longer in banking. It was time. And that was a very stressful point in my life. I learned a lot about the credit industry, about banks as a whole, and I got a lot of phenomenal experience from that. So we packed up the truck and moved to Beverly, as they say. Actually, Wetumpka, I'm going to get technical. And I leveled up, got a nice house, took a great job. I was making more money than I've probably made in a long time. And I was really excited. And I mean, the future was bright. And 6 months later, the company was in trouble and they were looking to cut expenses, and they cut a lot of management teams. And my team happened to be one of them in an attempt to save money. Well, I basically went to work on a Tuesday and came home an hour later with no job. And the guy that I was working with through this transition basically said, hey, you won't sit on the bench long, you're good at what you do. So fast forward about a month later, I've been putting in my resumes everywhere. I was stressed out. I had gone to taking to social media to kind of, for something to do and learn something. And I got a phone call from a gentleman by the name of David Darden. And I'll never forget that day. I was at home, stressed out, applying for jobs, freaking out because I'd been unemployed at that point for like 3 weeks. I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't do no more than I'm doing. And of course, I'm in this beautiful new home and leveled up. My kids are at school, and, daddy's a big fat loser sitting at home doing nothing. And this call comes in, and he's like, hey, what you think about the radio business? So, I don't know. It's not a bad deal. I could get into that. Cool. Well, let's meet tomorrow morning about 9:30. Yes, sir. So I got the address and information, and I was like, I'm gonna be in the radio business. That's dope. I can't. I don't know if I'm gonna be behind the scenes, if they're gonna let me be on air. Like, I didn't know what I was getting into, but I was like, yes, Lord, yes. I can't wait. I want to be. I was always a dream of mine to be in the radio business. I show up, and there's a sign out front that says Motorola. I was like, well, I guess Motorola does make some radio stuff. I'm not really, I've never really been inside a radio station for real, but I walk in the door, and a sweet woman who I, grew to love and thought was phenomenal. She was like one of my good friends even still. We met, and she pointed me to Mr. Darden's office, which I'd walked past on my way in. We sat down, and I quickly realized this was not the radio business I thought it was. It was the actual two-way radio business. We chatted. I was sold. I thought it was a really phenomenal opportunity. So I was like, yeah, I mean, definitely interested. So we became friends that day. Whether I got the job or not, I determined David and I'd probably wind up being friends. He, sent me a text message, and I, responded back professional. And he's like, you're gonna have to go in front of the powers that be. So I went and met with him, and he told me, the lay of the land and what it was all about, how it worked. And so the next day, I drove up to Birmingham and met with the owner and three partners, and I got me a job. So 2 weeks later, I started. That was right before the holidays, and that's how David and I got started and got introduced to each other. Was working together and selling Motorola products and services, and I quickly learned a couple of things. By far the youngest guy in the industry at that time, still kind of am in a way, but this is not like cool and sexy to everybody, but it's an absolute necessity, and there are very few people who know and understand what it is we do. So that's kind of how I delved into two-way radio. And, timing is everything. So there's a lot of stories I could go into from there to where I'm at today. Now, David, Dart, and we're still friends. We're actually, we partnered up to do this radio thing again. And I've been working with him for a little over a year and a half. And, man, I'm digging it. There's a lot of phenomenal stories that can go with it. But one thing I learned working with David, and, you just go out there and do it. I can't tell you how many times we've sold something in concept and had to figure it out. We knew it would work. And I mean, in theory, a lot of things should work, but we've also had to go and fix things that other people thought would work and couldn't figure it out. So, one of the things with David was, we don't go and hostily modify everything, but when hostile modification is necessary, we take our time and due diligence and get it done. There's never an excuse to just not do something. So it's been a very eye-opening experience. Like I said, coming from all the things that I've come from, and David and I have been working together. Like I said, we worked together off and on since I left Motorola, and now that we've been working together consistently, there's good things in our future, man. We've got some phenomenal things that are going to happen and take place, and I look forward to what we can accomplish, and maybe you never know. My kids might get into this business. It's a business where you can literally write your own paycheck. So, I mean, there you have it, folks. Get started. Figure out the timing, but figure out what it is you want to do and just do it. Well, that just about wraps it up for us. I hope you had fun. I know I did, and I have certainly enjoyed sharing some of this with you. If you found it helpful, please let me know in the podcast reviews. Reach out to me, and I'll have a website up soon, so we'll get you going with that. And hey, again, I really do appreciate you listening to me. And next episode, we'll have a special guest on, and we'll learn some more fun things, and I'll try to be professional. Thanks so much for joining me. Look forward to the next time. Till then, be safe.